Nobody talks about the shops that go unnoticed, the ones that don't even turn on social media, the ones that open at sunrises and closes after everyone gone home, but still hoping to break even. While India celebrated fast internet, flashy apps, and the next day delivery, lakhs of small shopkeepers were felt behind, slowly drowning under outdated systems, unreliable suppliers, and the complete loneliness in the business. Nobody was billing for them, not really actually. So they didn't have the time to wait 10 days for the stock. They didn't have the margin to pay for the middleman. And they definitely didn't have the access to the funding or the bulk discounts. So their entire life depended on the daily sales, and every late delivery meant a loss of customer, which means they lose the customer. But the world kept ignoring them as if they don't even matter. Three people saw this mess, not from the outside but from the inside, who are Ahmed, Sujit, and the Vaibhav have already worked deep inside India's e-commerce backbone, which is Flipkart. So they weren't failures looking for the comeback. They were leaders who were tired of building things that only serve the top 1% of the India. They saw this gap so clearly it hurted them. They didn't even jump into that blindly. They walked away from the money, position, and the status to solve a problem most people didn't even consider worth solving. So they didn't even chase the headlines. They didn't look for the investors. They started UDAAN with something that almost nobody even uses anymore, which is patience. There was no platform, just a WhatsApp group. Yes, billion-dollar idea began on the WhatsApp. They added a few retailers they personally spoke to, so they sent photos of the products, they wrote down the orders, they arranged trucks manually. Some deliveries were delayed, some stocks got damaged, some payments didn't even come on the time. It was messy, slow, and painful, but it was real. And that is what that made it work. Because when everyone is building fast apps for the rich people, Udan was building slow trust for the real people, and that's where actual the business begins. And now here, shopkeepers began to share Udan with their friends. Word spread not through advertisements but through conversations at tea stalls and the cash counters. And as demand grew, so they did pressure. Because see, when the brand is growing, the pressure is increasing. Because handling $20 is easy, but handling 2,000 is not. So they needed tech, they needed scale, they needed speed, but they couldn't even afford to lose the hearts of what they have actually built before. So they have made a decision which is not like overbuilt. So they just built what needed. The application was released. It didn't look fancy. It wasn't made for the iPhone users. It was made only for the man who have never used a B2B application before in his life. So big buttons, clear images, simple checkouts, and the one promise: we will deliver what we show. But that was it. That was not enough. They wanted deeper, and they went deeper. So they offer something like powerful, which is credit, not because it's easy, but because it's needed. They allowed shopkeepers to order goods without paying upfront, and that sounds small. But for a small store which is running on a daily basis like sales, it was a lifeline. They started giving 7 to 14 days credit, so it came with risk and a lot of risk. But they had built enough data to make smart calls, and the impact was massive. Shopkeepers started ordering more and more, even faster with confidence. And Udan was not just a marketplace there, it was became an oxygen for those who were ignored by every other system. And slowly the money started coming in. So on a 5,000 rupees order, they earned about 100 rupees from the delivery and 250 rupees from the seller commission and 75 to 100 rupees as interest from the credit, and that's over 450 per order. Multiply that by thousands per day, and now it looked like a machine and took and looked. So investors came in fast like Lightspeed, DST Global, Tencent, and over 12,000 crore raised in just few years. And Udan became the fastest Indian startup to reach unicorn status, valued at over 1 billion in the just 26 months. But they didn't know what was coming next, and it wouldn't be pretty. Yeah, the thing is, the money was coming, but so were the cracks, not the loud cracks, not yet. The quiet ones. Because the kind that starts inside spreadsheets, behind dashboards, in the meeting rooms that don't want actually want to say it louder. And that is orders were increasing, cities were actually being added, and warehouses were being filled up. But so were the cost, which means the trucks needed fuel, warehouses needed to pay rent, and the credit needed to be recovered. Salaries had to be paid, packaging, handling, like storage, damage, and returns were actually endless. On the outside, Udan looked unstoppable. On the inside, it was actually bleeding, and the bleeding quietly is worse than bleeding loudly. So, in the financial year 2020, Udan made just over 1000 crore rupees in the revenue, but the losses are 2482 crores, and that's about 2.5 loss for every single rupee earned. But nobody wants us to hear that. Not when the valuation was crossing $3 billion, not when new investors were still falling. And then the world crashed open. The pandemic didn't knock on the door, it kicked it open. So roads shut down, shops closed, trucks delivered, disappeared, warehouses were stuck. Credit recovery fell apart. The heartbeat of the Udan, the shopkeeper, was now in survival mode. Daily orders dropped, many retailers defaulted. The product return increased, delivery slowed, and the cost of keeping the engine running stayed exactly the same. Every rupee became a weight. Udan wasn't ready, nobody was. So their entire structure built to grow now had to shrink, not gently but sharply. Fast, they began cutting staff first, then operations, then credit lines. More than 3,000 employees were laid off. So warehouses were shut, entire cities were paused, and new categories were frozen. Expansion stopped there. They didn't talk about the scale anymore, they just talked about staying alive. It was brutal emotionally, mentally, and even also financially. So, but it was actually necessary. If they didn't act fast that much enough, the whole company would collapse under its own weight. So they started rebuilding from the inside, like credits became smarter, data driven, only trusted, like repeated customers got access. Like loan periods were actually reduced, collection systems were automated, risk models were revised, like logistics became even tighter. Large hubs just replaced with smaller or cheaper micro warehouses. So routes were optimized, returns were tracked better. Even the app changed. Like new features weren't added just because they looked nice. Every new update was now tied to save time, saving money, or increasing repeated orders. So they stopped pretending to be perfect and started becoming practical. In a world that worships growth, Udan began valuing survival. So not because everyone understood it, some called it failure and some said they had lost the game. But deep down, something powerful was happening. So they were becoming a real company, not a PR story, not a startup myth, a real functioning business that felt the pain of every mistake and every decision that took. By 2023, the burn rate had become down by over 60%. So monthly losses were reduced, operations stabilized, they didn't even need like fresh funding just to breathe. That silence, that one without headline, was where the real growth happened. Because while others were busy selling the ideas of success, Udan was quietly learning how to survive it. They have stopped hiring in a hurry, they stopped scaling without structure, and they have started saying no to the deals that didn't even make the long term sense. And for the first time in years, the company began breathing at its own pace, not for the media attention, not for the valuation hype, but for its own survival. From the outside, the shine had faded. There were no new funding announcements, like no founder interviews, like no viral LinkedIn post. But on the inside, something was being rebuilt that most people don't even see, and which is discipline. Discipline in delivery, discipline in decision making, discipline in spending each and every rupee like it have mattered. Because now it really did. And this is a part of most people miss. The real strength of a business is not how fast it grows, it is how long does it last when everything around it starts failing. So Udan lasted. While many startups shut down, Udan kept operating. While many others have fired, disappeared, and moved on to the next idea, Udan stayed. Not because it was easy, but because they have remembered why they have started. They had not built UDAAN for the investors, they had not built it for the headlines, they had built it for the shopkeepers who opens his shutters at the 7 a.m. morning, hoping today will be the better day than the yesterday. So they have built it for the woman running a sari store from her home, trying to support her family financially while dealing with the delayed deliveries and the bad stock. And they knew those people were still out there, still waiting, and still needing help. So Udan kept going, not as a unicorn, not as a savior, but as a responsible business that made its mistake, took its losses, and chose to stand out in the backup. And if you listen closely, this is the part of that matters the most. They stopped chasing the idea of being everything and started becoming excellent at what they have truly stood for, like serving the people what the rest of the world forgot and not even thought of. So there was something deeply honest in that decision, something that can't be measured in the funding rounds or the downloads. And that is where the biggest lessons is hiding. Because business is not just about money, it's about the meaning. Not every idea will succeed the first time. Not every plan will work. But for the purpose is real, and if the intent is clean and clear, and if you are willing to bleed for what you believe in, you have already built something worth more than any valuation. So Yudan teaches this silently, that it teaches that surviving is a skill, and that real impact doesn't scream, it screams, it stays, it shows up again and again. And it teaches that even when the world moves on, even when the noise stops you, even when your name disappears from the front page, you can still choose to be built for the right reasons. That is not failure, that is strength. That is not hype, that is honesty, and that is not the end. That is the kind of business story India needs more and more. And if you are listening this to the right now, maybe you are dreaming of your own startup, maybe you're struggling with your own business, but remember this: don't just chase funding, don't just copy what's trending. Look around you, find a real problem, care about it deeply, build for those who have been never forgotten, because they need not to be forgot, because that is what actually makes that to last longer. And when you refuse to give up, even the quietest fights become unstoppable. So you don't need to be the next unicorn, you just need to be the next one who actually cares. Now just go and build something that actually matters, and get back to me now.